1977 Warnings from Beyond, Hell. Exorcism, Switzerland. 1977 April 25, Beelzebub. She makes me say, alas. Alas. Some of the cardinals who surround the Pope are wolves and if they were not so, they would not be able to maintain in position with such subtle skill, a man who is playing the part of a second Pope, or rather of the first one, for the true Pope is the one in the background. It is said that they are doing this, for in this way they are condemning the true Pope to many cruel sufferings, which he would otherwise not have to endure. However, we are doing everything to prevent people from becoming aware that there is a second Pope functioning. We are shrewder than all men put together. We are doing everything to keep that hidden. I have said that they can keep it hidden with a subtle skill, and that even traditionalist priests and lay people do not want to believe it nor to acknowledge it. But, unfortunately for you, I mean that is the way it is. They say, there is no double. It isn't possible, there is only one Pope. This must be said, be prudent and as cunning as the serpents. Be prudent and cunning like the serpents, but do not be in a hurry to give the lie to it, for there reigns in actual fact, there reigns a false Pope, an imitation Pope. It is important that people are woken up gradually, for they are nearly all asleep. We are now confusing laymen, priests, and bishops, and goodness knows who else. We are seeking to confuse everyone everywhere, and to whisper in their ears. We can even blind the cardinals who come and go in the Vatican. We can organize things in such a way that they are not even aware of it to begin with. Surgery has made so much progress today that it will soon be able to make a man the same as another, even to the feel of him. And when a man lives in the Vatican as the double does, the cardinals can, at their leisure, talk to him, and teach him all the habits and mannerisms of the true Pope so well, that he has no difficulty in imitating all this mimicry. Only, sometimes, he makes a small blunder, but nobody notices it. 1977 April 25, Beelzebub. Before such a great sacrament, and most especially before Christ comes for the first time into the soul, and establishes a union between heaven and this human being who is going to communicate, making a confession is indispensable, a confession which is valid, complete, entire, whole. When that has not taken place, respect for the sacrament disappears, and the same for heaven. And of all holy things, all piety and all respect disappear almost completely. But what is more lamentable, she makes me say, what is much more lamentable, is that this gives the communicant child a false mentality with regard to the sacrament of the altar, and in a more general way, with regard to the Holy Eucharist. These children will have the feeling that they can have as many faults and sins as they like, and can go to communion, since that will be allowed. In cases where confession before Holy Communion is missing, an element of incalculable importance is missing, it is harm which, in the majority of cases, or at least in many cases, will never be able to be repaired. She makes me say that if the priests have little enough sense to send a child to the Holy Eucharist before he has confessed, and even before he has the notion of sin, its pardon and remission, it should not be allowed at all. It is a disgrace, even we down there must acknowledge it, that such children are allowed to do this. It is said that children do not yet have faults, that children are innocent. But they have more faults and sins than is believed. Down there we have children, many more children than you think. She makes me say that all the children who are not prepared by their priests, who have had no instruction on the subject of confession, must, for the love of God, be directed elsewhere where they will be given this instruction, for example, in another parish. Where that is not possible, the parents themselves must take the catechism into their hands and learn with the child, until he is capable of receiving such a great gift as the Holy Eucharist. Otherwise, the child will never be led onto the good road. Later he will say, "Bah! The very first time, I went to Holy Communion quite well without confession." From there, very many children go on to the stage where we do not want to speak any more. Not anymore. So many children, and above all young people, go from there to the stage where it means nothing more to them to receive the sacrament in a state of mortal sin. That is why she calls on all the parents, catechists, teachers to say to the children that they must never, never ever approach the sacrament, the Holy Eucharist, to receive Holy Communion without having made a worthy, good, complete confession. If they have not done that, far better they do not go at all, because there are many graces, a large number of graces, fewer. People should also be told that each time they make a good confession, worthy, correct, as it should be made, then the Holy Eucharist, Holy Communion, brings many more graces and has much more value than when the faithful receive the body of Christ without confession. Each confession contains, incalculable graces which you will be able to understand only in eternity, that is to say in the next world up there. She suffers great torments and great sorrows each time that he is received unworthily, or when he is received as if it were a piece of bread or some other food which is being taken, which is munched and eaten without thought to what it is. But she suffers most of all seeing children, first communicants, admitted to communion not only without confession, but without sufficient preparation for this holy sacrament. Yes, they do not even have a good, complete preparation for Holy Communion. They have no proper preparation, without even mentioning confession. Many of the first communicants do not even know that they should make acts of faith, hope and charity. They are simply told, now, you are going to communion. Christ is good for everyone. He loves all children, he presses them to his heart. You are still innocent, he loves children like you. Go to him and open your heart to him, unite yourself with him as often as you like. That gives him pleasure, great pleasure, but they do not point out that he cannot be pleased with all the children. They do not see that, they pass it over in silence. They do not point out that it is often an abomination for Christ to go into a heart that already carries in it very many sins, some of them capital sins. We don't want to speak any more. Not any more. She launches an appeal. She makes me say that, before all other things, the preparation for Holy Communion should be made in a more serious way, more complete and more fitting than is the case today. Above all but this I have already said, confession absolutely must precede it. Parents should prepare the child very, very carefully, and, moreover, should pray each day with him. They should ask him questions and do everything that they can so that he makes a good confession. It is not necessary for them to go to find the priest to reproach him for not having done it, himself, and thus provoke an argument. They are not absolutely obliged to do that, to speak thus to the priest. They can do it, but it is not an absolute duty for them. However, they can, in all peace of mind, instruct their child themselves and prepare him for his first confession. In many towns, there are several churches. If they live in the country, they can and should take their children somewhere else, in cases where they would be obstructed by their own priest. By purifying his soul, the child will receive many greater graces, immense graces, crucial for the rest of his life, are lost because the child has not learned to approach Christ on his first communion day with a pure heart, in some way worthy of him. I had to say that again. It is also necessary for this to be included in your cheap and rotten book. Prudence in Judgment. There are some quite sincere people who believe that this comes from the Pope and who do not know of the existence of a double. Nor do they know that it is a sin to receive communion in the hand. They do not wish to stand out from the crowd nor to be conspicuous. They do not know, for example, what is said in the book, Warnings, or what has been said previously through authentic privileged souls, namely that communion should not be taken in the hand. Such people are not committing a serious sin. It is not their fault if the priest does things that way. And then, there is also this, in many churches, when people genuflect and wish to receive communion in the mouth, they are made to feel unpopular as far as the priest is concerned. In that case also, the sin is not so serious. He up there judges each case individually. It cannot be said categorically that such a person will go to hell because he receives communion in the hand, when he does not know that this practice is not desired up there. These people act through obedience and believe that it comes from the Pope, because they do not know that there is a double and that there are some cardinals who are disloyal to the Pope. They go along under the banner of obedience. I want to say that if these Christians should happen to get hold of tracts coming from other genuinely privileged souls, or from priests, which warn them that they have no right and should not, and if they receive the interior light which, when received certainly comes from on high, and if, in spite of everything, they do the opposite, saying to themselves, "It's all the same whether I receive communion in the mouth or in the hand, it is of no importance," then the situation is different. Then, naturally, it is a sin. That is what else we must tell you. It depends always on each individual case. The same thing applies to the Holy Mass. The Mass of Saint Pius V is considered by those up there, by heaven, to the preferred Mass. But many priests should be told that they have no right to trouble, or upset, people by saying, if there is no Mass of Saint Pius V, do not go at all, say a Mass for yourselves at home on your own. This attitude is not good. In spite of everything, such a priest is not a good pastor, shepherd. For we have already said it on a previous occasion, it is a huge loss of graces, it is true, but the new Mass, to the degree in which it is celebrated in all good faith and through obedience to the bishop, still brings nevertheless, many graces. Even if it does not have the plenitude of graces of the Mass of Saint Pius V, it brings some graces all the same. If people stay at home and believe that they only have to open up their missals, thus believing themselves to be better and superior to the rest, this is not good. There are also some traditionalists who exalt themselves above the modernists. Those up there do not want any of that. That is not the spirit of on high. They think in heaven that this smacks of Phariseeism, and no one has the right to be like that. She makes me say that there are also many traditionalists who are full of themselves. We do not wish to speak any more. Traditionalists. There are numbers of traditionalists, as many lay people as priests, who are full of self-righteousness, who are steeped in a kind of new Phariseeism. They say, and sometimes they preach, we are the good ones, we are the just, the rest are not worth much any more. We will go to heaven. That is pretty close to the sects, they say the same thing. Those up there do not like this behavior at all. They do not love men very much who are righteous in their own eyes. If, in this book, it has been necessary to speak about the Mass and about the Church, and amongst other things, the Mass of Saint Pius V, that does not mean to say that certain traditionalists should exalt themselves above the modernists, as if they were the only ones who know how to make a sound judgment, in a suitable way, and with all the necessary competence. That is not what this book is all about. It is simply intended to expose all the abuses in the Church, such as they exist today. But, to complete the picture, we must still say this: the priests who say, it is better for you to stay at home rather than go to such masses, are making a mistake. If the Mass is degraded to that point where the priest himself no longer believes in the words of the consecration, and no longer pronounces the words as they should be pronounced, if he no longer has the intention of consecrating, then the host is not consecrated, it is true, but, for all that, people can still pray, in the Church. I have to say this also: they are defrauded of Christ and of the fullness of the graces, it is true, but certain graces are still attached to it. Especially when good Christians, of deep faith, go to Mass and communion full of devotion, with the intention of receiving Christ, then heaven is fair enough not to say simply, because the priest is not doing things properly, there will be no graces here. Those people nevertheless do receive certain graces. If the people have the opportunity of going to a Mass of Saint Pius V, then heaven prefers that, very much so. But if there is no other possibility, they may go to another Mass. After the Mass of Saint Pius V in Latin, the Tridentan Mass in the vernacular comes in second place, provided that it comprises the totality of the words of the Tridental Mass as far as this is possible. Only after these, in third place, comes the new Mass. But those people, if they do not know these things and are of good faith, nevertheless fulfill their duty to the Lord, in so far as that is their intention. On the other hand, if they know very well that a kilometer further away, they would find a Mass of St. Pius V, and if they say to themselves, "Bah! That is too far away for me, I am not going to run over there," and if they know very well that that would be better, then we have a different situation. Then, they have lost out enormously through negligence. They should have gone that kilometer. Do you know how far we would go, if we were still able to share in such great graces? Ah! We would travel to the ends of the earth, if we still had a chance. We do not wish to imply by this, that the other Masses are as good. We have already said enough about which Mass those up there prefer. We have to reveal the error which many priests are making. It is a fundamental error to instill into men that they must not go to any new Mass, that it comes from the devil, etc. That also is throwing the baby away with the bath water, it is going to the opposite extreme. Never does such a condemnation have any place under the mantle of love of neighbor. In these circumstances there are modernists who have love of neighbor, who are sometimes better than such traditionalists who exalt themselves above others. We are obliged to say that as part of this, and everything we have just said about the sacraments and other subjects. And it should also be said that there are many traditionalists who are Pharisees. Otherwise, the modernists will think that all the traditionalists should be lumped together, that all the traditionalists are fanatics, rebellious fanatics, and will fight them with every means. Now we do not wish to speak any more. This is the way it is, those up there love all their children, even if they have fallen into error. If, under the cloak of obedience, because they no longer know what they ought to do, they follow the opinions of the bishops and the priests, then it is hardly their fault. If they act in all good faith, it will not be held to their account so strictly, although these circumstances are so frightful, frightful, frightful. Priests and communion in the hand. What do you mean by communion in the hand as far as the priests are concerned? In no circumstances. Absolutely not. Do you believe that the priest is the puppet of his people? He has the right of command. Broadly speaking, we have to add this: if the priests were to give communion in the mouth, as those up there wish, they would probably meet with opposition at the beginning, because we, demons, put oil on the fire, but in the long run, they would have many more faithful in their churches than in the ones where communion is given differently, where there is this lukewarmness. Then you should say to the priest whom you are going to help, "Father, I believe that communion in the mouth is the correct thing. In no way can I take the responsibility of giving communion in the hand. I hope you will accept this. For you it is a fundamental obligation to give communion in the mouth, because you know that there are many more blessings and much more respect. There are people everywhere who are going to make things difficult for you. The opposite effect also happens. But, essentially, they will raise their hats to you. Here is the way it is with such people, even if sometimes they contradict and vex you, in their heart of hearts, they say to themselves, perhaps he is right after all, he still knows what should be done and goes his way through all obstacles, he acts according to his conviction, his way of doing things is probably the correct one. Those up there are of the opinion that he who is still able to, some way or another, must, for the love of heaven, give communion in the mouth, for it is a sin when one knows yet does not do it. Happy those who believe without having seen. Then there would be no more horrible profanation of the sacrament as there is now. The best way would be for the priest to pour water over his hands after communion, or, for example, when he has given communion in a home, to dip his hands into a glass of water and then drink it to the last drop. That way, there would be more respect. That is still done here and there, but now, we do not wish to speak any more. The sacrament of baptism and the responsibility of the godparents. Baptism, baptism. She has ordered, baptism. Do you understand? All of a sudden, she has ordered, baptism, but then she is always giving orders. Let her go away up there into her 7 clouds. We are obliged to be bored to tears down below. Many priests do not administer baptism properly. The complete rite with its adjuration to the spirits is no longer used as it should be. Often the words, I renounce, are not even said anymore. We do not want to say our own name. That is not even said anymore, and that is something we are in agreement with. It is a great stroke of luck for us. Not saying that any more is deplorable, first and foremost, for the one being baptized. There are many possessions today because baptism is no longer properly administered, we do not wish to speak. Not to speak. Ah! This is almost crushing us. She is almost crushing us. Many things have their beginnings through that is why it is deplorable. When a godfather holds and represents the little one being baptized, he should say, I renounce, etc. The godparents should say that on behalf of the child, in the same way they would also have, for their whole lives, the important, the serious, but also the magnificent duty, of helping their godchild and guiding him onto the good road, should he happen to stray off it. Instead of that, now they look at the prettiness of the little baby, what hair has he got, what is the cushion like, is it embroidered or not, has the priest made the baptistry ornate enough, or is there nothing there except the baptismal fonts, is the godmother wearing a new dress, or is she just as usual, is the godfather the only one with a completely new outfit? They no longer think of the responsibility they are undertaking. They hold the child and let the water run over its forehead, but very few today think about anything else. Formerly, it used not to be like that. Naturally, one cannot generalize, but today there are scarcely any people who take baptism truly seriously and who still do things properly. Formerly, the majority of godparents were fully aware of what they were doing. A day or two before the baptism, or more, according to the time available, they would kneel down and pray for their godchild. They were conscious of the heavy responsibility of their office. They continued to pray for their godchild and often spared themselves no trouble for him. They were concerned with the life of this human being right up to the time when death came to carry them away. That was the way they fulfilled their obligation. They concerned themselves much more with the Christian life of their godchild. They asked themselves how they could benefit him through their prayers, how best they could help him, what was the best way of coming to his aid if he had strayed from the good road. Now it is all quite different. Now it is all the same to them. As often as not it is they themselves who have strayed from the good road. Now they ask themselves, what partner has my godchild chosen? Is he happy with his wife? I do not want to speak any more. Has she brought a good dowry? Do they make a fine-looking couple? Is the baby pretty? Does he dress well enough to make a good impression? Does he have a good job? A profession that gives him good standing in society? What it boils down to is that I want a godchild who is presentable. Not one who goes about in rags. Ah! We do not wish to speak any more. It crushes us to be obliged to say these things. Integrity of the rite in the administration of the sacraments. The old rite, complete and unabridged, is what they should use. The new rite is an invention of ours and of the Freemasons, who have succeeded in manipulating the cardinals, and sometimes even the Pope, who did not become aware of it soon enough. There has been such a sell-out with all those sacraments which have been changed. It is the result of our scheming, even for the sacrament of the sick. The sacrament of the sick. We no longer wanted the 5 organs of the senses to be anointed with the holy oils, while the corresponding words were said, for example, may God forgive all the sins which you have committed through the sense of hearing. Particular attention was given to the ears and to the eyes, to the mouth, and to the nose, as well as to the hands. We did not want that any more. That used to obtain too many graces for the seriously ill or the dying. We thought that if we, but we do not want to say that. We thought that if we could lead the cardinals and those in Rome to the point where only the hands, and the brow, are anointed with the holy oils, or better still, where the holy oils are not even used at all anymore, then we would have gained a great deal. The more they do things superficially, the fewer the grace received by the dying. And then perhaps we will be able to grab the man by his coattails at the edge of the grave and pull him down below. That is what we thought, and that is why we have organized and arranged things in this way. What I mean is, in collusion with the Freemasons. I must say that there is still a mini blessing from up there, there still remains a little mini blessing. But fundamentally, nevertheless, there is for those up there, a much greater loss than if things were still done properly. Now, it is necessary for me to repeat this: all 5 senses must be anointed completely and fully. The relatives should kneel around the bed, and everything should be made ready for the priest. There should be water, a cross for a happy death, holy water, 5 small cotton balls set out tidily. All those present should pray for the one dying. Then we have less power and strength to make him disorientated and bring him to the stage where he is no longer capable of making an act of contrition. This is particularly valuable, for us, in the case of a man who is not in the state of grace. But if he were blessed on the 5 sense organs, if these words were said, the sins which you have committed with your eyes, or which you have committed through your hearing, or which you have committed through your mouth, etc., if the corresponding parts of the body were named and anointed, then there would be many much greater graces for the dying person. It even happens that people in a state of mortal sin can still be saved through that. To think that we had to say that. The sacrament of confirmation. And confirmation, that is another special chapter. But we do not want to speak about that. That was all we wanted, to be obliged to deal with that. The old one, Lucifer, is going to get into a rage again. He is going to start dancing about, saying, "You are earthworms completely stupid. Can you not keep your mouth shut?" But the great lady forces us. She forces us. The old one knows that very well, naturally, but in spite of that, he gets in a real frenzy. He torments us. We cannot look at you, with your large rosary with its large cross on the end, which you make shine in the sun, and in all weathers. We cannot look at that, when one of you is there with your habit to which this crown, rosary, is attached, with its shining cross hanging from the end of it. We cannot look at it. We hate those things, we hate those things. Ah! Confirmation! Confirmation, this damned confirmation! That would make a special chapter. But we do not want to speak about that now. You will have to say again, "Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten us with your grace, strengthen us." For that, you must get down on your knees, otherwise we will not be obliged to speak about confirmation. And the very first thing you must do, is sing a hymn to the Holy Spirit, says that woman up there. The great lady. Now would be the time. The great lady also wishes you to say a decade, of the Rosary, in honor of the Holy Spirit. There will be still more revelations, unhappily there will be more, as we would prefer not to make any at all. And then 7 more Hail Marys in honor of the 7 dolours of Mary, and 3 times, "Holy, holy, holy," and the hymn, "May the covenant of my baptism remain firm," if possible, all the verses. What doesn't the great lady want? What doesn't she have in her head to get what she wants? Not blessed. If only she were not blessed. If only that one had not sent the Holy Spirit. We do not want to say anything, go away to somewhere else. You are 3 creatures wearing trousers, that is what you are, 3 creatures wearing trousers. And that one who is making signs of the cross all the time, that one there in the corner, everywhere signs of the cross, and still more signs of the cross. It almost breaks us in two. I hate those signs of the cross. It would have been much better if that one had stayed at home. Why did he have to crawl back here again today? Ah! Confirmation. Confirmation is no longer administered as it should be, at least not everywhere. First and foremost, she makes me say, when a candidate wishes to receive confirmation, he should first of all prepare himself well for it for several weeks. He should always pray again and again to the Holy Spirit, asking Him for many graces. If this is not done, there are many graces which he should receive, but which he does not receive. He does not pray and receives only a superficial instruction about confirmation, as is the case most of the time, and then goes trotting off to church, to kneel in a pew, and then goes up to let the bishop make a little flick at him, and then goes back, without thinking much. Then there are hardly any graces to be gained. Then, that does not produce true soldiers of Christ as it should. Of course it is still there, but it must be done correctly. It is no longer done properly everywhere, but most of the time. The essential part is what takes place in the heart of the candidate. He should prepare himself very well, as I have said. For several weeks, he should prepare himself, and beg the Holy Spirit and the great lady up there, and everyone in heaven, he should beg them to pray for him, so that he may become a true and good soldier of Christ. He may also pray to the souls in purgatory. The souls in purgatory bestow much more on a man who prays for them. Then they are much better disposed and they intervene actively. One may pray to all of them. For confession too, one should always invoke all heaven, all the saints and all the blessed, all the souls in purgatory and all the choirs of holy angels. Guardian angels. They are all together. Naturally, one's own guardian angel should be invoked in particular, or if one has several, they should all be invoked. You priests especially, have more than one of them. There are some of you who have 2 or 3 guardian angels, if you are involved in work of the angels, according to the responsibility that they have to fulfill. But also, we do not want to speak any more. But most of the time, the rest of the priests also receive a second guardian angel at their priestly ordination, unless they have only a very limited responsibility when one great and competent angel is enough. But most of the time, priests receive a second one. Yes, their angels are assigned to them according to the importance of their function and their burden. I must explain that the guardian angels are all great, but they do not all possess the same might and power of protection. There are all kinds of them, it is in the hands and the disposition of God. It can happen that the guardian angel of a child who has grown up not having the dignity or the protective power of a great one, or even an archangel, may be assigned to another child, and that this man who is grown up and who is subject to greater trials, may have a more powerful one allotted to him. That is how God, He up there, treats you. He does everything for your greatest good. He orders and directs and does everything, you really have no idea of what He does. Thus it is that His paternal eyes watch over you. And as for us, down below, what do we have? We do not like speaking about the angels. But then, she is always wanting something, something which is in opposition to our schemes. Prayer must precede and accompany the action of the Holy Spirit. I must get back to confirmation. If such a candidate has not prayed to the Holy Spirit beforehand, and prays to Him even less afterwards, he will never be a true soldier of Christ. He will drift along, he will follow the crowd. He now receives far fewer graces than if the sacrament were still administered in the proper way, with all the oil and with all the words which were said formerly. The candidate should also, to as great a degree as possible, make his own commitment to become a true soldier of Christ, then he would not change direction to the left at the first trifle which is found to be blocking his way. Being a soldier of Christ means putting oneself alongside Christ and the Church, even when that becomes difficult, even when it becomes difficult on all sides. There are some situations where one is pilloried by the world and where one would prefer not to hold fast in front of men to what should be done and said. But it must be done, because Christ has said, "He who will acknowledge me before men, I too will acknowledge him before my Father." That happens only when one really does the right thing and is a true soldier of Christ. During all of your life, it must be remembered that you carry an ineffaceable mark. When a man has been confirmed and bears this ineffaceable mark, we can torment him much more in hell than one who has never been confirmed. But, Nevertheless, he who has been confirmed has much more strength to resist evil and to do good, than he who has not been. The sacrament of marriage. And then marriage. One cannot say, now that we are engaged, and will, in any case, be getting married, we can, to all intents and purposes, consider ourselves as married, and therefore, we can do and allow ourselves whatever we like. Are we not made for each other? One cannot do that. Those up there do not want that. Self-denial and sacrifices are necessary, until the day when one will approach the altar with his or her fiancé, to seal the union before a priest and before those up there, before the church, and before everyone, before all the angels and saints, for one's whole life. When people who live in a free union, we have had to say this before, have not learned how to practice self-denial and to make sacrifices, they will be no more able to do that within marriage. It often happens, that a Protestant man and a Catholic woman, or the other way around, come and say, "Father, what should we do? Is there no solution? We would very much like to be married in the Catholic Church." They still say that. If only they had reflected beforehand, that marriage with a Protestant constitutes danger. So they come, and the priest holds out his hands to them and says, "Yes, we have our way of doing that. You can both come to the Catholic Church. We will make it an ecumenical service." That pleases the people, they lap it up. The Protestants in particular, say, "It was great for us to see something like that. It has done a lot for us." Naturally, they do not see what a loss of graces and blessings the mixed marriage represents for the Catholic party. A good Catholic may not contract a Protestant marriage. What will happen later on? The mother-in-law, the father-in-law, will assert themselves, and it will be very difficult for the Catholic partner to persevere. Not to mention the fact that married life can often become very difficult, when the crosses will come unexpectedly and the husband and wife will have misunderstandings. If at those times, they do not share the same religion, or the same religious persuasion, that is an extra very heavy cross. Also, these things often give rise to arguments and irritations. Married life is often enough very rough. We must say this in addition. She makes me say that everyone, before keeping company, going steady, young men and young women alike, or when on the point of doing so, must without any delay, ask the prospective partner which religious persuasion he or she belongs to. If necessary, it must not go on, the logical conclusion must be drawn, break it off as becomes a good soldier of Christ. Heaven does not want mixed marriages. It tolerates them, but it doesn't like them. The sacrament of marriage must be contracted with all possible seriousness. Many years ago, at Cana, Christ first of all prayed for that couple. He exhorted them and counseled them about the life they should lead. He had them enclosed within his heart. He loved them very much. People who are invited to a wedding should also have the intention of praying in a special way for the young couple. Every time there is a marriage, all the people involved in the wedding, parents and friends, should pray, nothing but pray, for the couple so that they may attain the highest place in their state of life, that they may fulfill their spousal duties until death separates them. The whole matter should be taken much more seriously than it is. Celibacy and true priesthood. Marriage is not at all easy. We whisper to the Catholic priests, "You are missing out on a lot, if you remain faithful to celibacy, if you do not drink to the bottom of the cup of joy." That is what we insinuate to the priests all the time, with so much insistence, so much perseverance, until the priest. It is enough then for a. We don't want to say anything, nothing at all. A dream woman comes prowling around the priest. That blasts the bottom out of the barrel. We whisper to them, "Don't say your breviary anymore, it is a waste of time." If they were still to say their breviary, these temptations would come less frequently. We know very well what actions to take. If all priests, without exception, were to devote 1 hour each day to their breviary, as used to be the case formerly, then we would have very little power. There would only be a few of them who would fall, but they would come back sooner, as they would not be blinded to the point of marrying this dream woman. They would think about it well beforehand if they were to say their breviary every day. Most of the time, they carry an even greater responsibility. They are well aware that this is a Catholic priest, and what an abundance of blessings. We do not want to speak. They know what an abundance of blessings the priest has, and how important his function is. That is why they should absolutely not prowl around him. These are grave sins, very grave, whose punishment will not be far away. Therefore, when these priests marry, many are almost immediately plunged into misfortune. We will put this idea into their heads, among others: if you take this dream woman, you will have a share of heaven. A share of heaven. We cannot give heaven in its completeness. That is not within our powers. Nobody would ever dare to promise it completely. But a share, that is what we trumpet into their ears. We put these ideas into their heads. Then we make one of these erotic fancies whirl all around him, and we tie up all the threads, until the barrel loses its bottom completely. Then, when he is already in a state of grave sin, the priest thinks, then we do not let him off so easily. We do everything to make him think, it would be wonderful if we had children. Then we whisper to him again, since you have gone so far, whatever else you may still do is of no consequence. And they continue along the road of sin, until they are completely stuck in the mire, and can no longer either advance or retreat. And even then, they still imagine that everything will go well for them. This flighty excuse me, but this woman who has little enough character to pursue a priest, will have no more character when married. Do you believe she has any virtues at all, that she is an angel of virtue? Then the mask drops, then the cloak falls away, then one can see what lies underneath: nothing but filth, and we do not want to speak any more. Many priests soon bitterly regret their actions, and there are quarrels. Because the priest has studied theology and has been molded in a certain way, and as he is not a crude sort of person, most of the time he does not let himself get too involved in these quarrels. But what cannot be changed continues to screw him up, gnawing at his heart like a cankerworm. Many priests soon bitterly regret. We must say this in addition: everything spiritual, everything which is concerned with higher things, with religion, with doing good, is as far above sensuality as heaven is above the earth. That is what the Blessed Virgin makes me say. The flesh only lasts a short time, and then with we do not want to speak. You have guessed it? Just think of the divorces, etc. We hold out bright prospects to them of a heaven on earth. In reality, many will have a terrible mountain to climb. Sensuality is a tremendous distance below spirituality. If the priests could know what they are losing by giving in to themselves, they would tear out their hair, they would travel miles to escape from such a woman and to avoid the temptation. God's grace is great and powerful, more universal and more exalted than all sensuality and all the pleasures of the world. Just think about the legend of Venus and Tannhauser. Better sermons would soon be found in that than those of many of today's priests. The profound repentance of this man would still be seen, and how he almost melted away with suffering for having taken himself off to be close to this Venus in the mountain. That would indeed be a better sermon than many actual sermons of today. This is still valid today. The times have not changed. In heaven time does not exist. It is an eternal now. All this is still valid today. All this still retains in our place down below as well as up there its full validity, although today's man believes he must have a much easier life, that one can sin as one likes, that he will no longer be held to account for it so rigorously. That is not the case in the sight of heaven. They have quite a different idea, a different opinion, altogether. You have hit the nail on the head, you are absolutely right. Up there, they are of the opinion that heaven should be merited through many crosses and self-denials. Priests and lay people must become aware of that again. Heaven, with all its sweetness and all its grandeur, can only be merited through heavy crosses, sacrifices, self-denials, and everything which puts restraints on, and runs counter to, one's own nature. But when it is merited, it brings an infinite beauty and dignity to all those who will have followed the narrow path. 1977 June 10, Beelzebub. Yes, he is still alive. We still have the luck that he is living. If he had been assassinated, that would be our contriving, so that the whole affair could be hushed up. We must say, by her order, the Blessed Virgin, that he is still in existence. The Pope is suffering a great torment, as we have already had to say. If he had been at the helm, able to say what he would like to say, the Church would never have reached the situation where it now is. He lives wretchedly in his apartments and is waiting for better time to return for the Church. Yet everything seems hopeless. He is literally tormented by his subordinates who should support and help him in his task and, in the grave situation in which the Church finds itself, back him up in everything. Instead of that, we don't want to say it, instead of that, we are able to arrange it so that he is no longer as competent. He doesn't have much to say anymore. He is a martyr. I have said that previously. He is in a worse situation than the martyr, Stephen. He is very much loved up there, very much loved. And we must say yet again about what comes from those insubordinate cardinals and those false, it must not be obeyed. At all events, he knows what is going on. He knows that he is suffering unspeakably because, owing to what those cardinals are doing, it is not what heaven and what he himself would wish which is published in the world and in the Church, and which reaches the bishops. He is very well aware that he is like a prisoner, that he is, as it were, a prisoner of the Vatican. He suffers a great torment because of this. Because some cardinals do not obey him and also deal in many things which are not the will of God, Judas was forced to say on August 17, 1975, that now it is no longer necessary to obey them. Judas said then, one cannot obey wolves, and no sheep throws itself into the jaws of the wolf. That should be shouted from the rooftops. All the bishops should be told that what comes from certain cardinals is not the truth, and because of that, obedience is not required. But they are all so blind, so completely and utterly blind, that they do not want to recognize this. Then there is still another factor, these three senior cardinals, or controllers. There are some of them in it, but those are the worst. Because to a large extent, they are in communication with us, we are able to organize and camouflage everything they are doing in such a way that the people are not aware of it. That is our good fortune. We are happy that they are unaware of it. If the infernal game those three cardinals are playing ever came to light. In former times, during the 15th century, that sort of thing would have led them to the stake as sorcerers. But today it is a phenomenon of the time. All those who preach and do good are victims of discrimination and are harassed. On the other hand, those who do evil, who squabble with their co-religionists and who act in such a diabolical way, who are involved in plots which can never, or only with extreme difficulty, be discovered, those are the ones who are much better off. They are accepted as being good and very competent, they must be obeyed, and what comes from them is perfect. It is inevitable that, in this insane and disoriented epoch, that we, down there, very often make that which is evil and artificial and which leads, or can lead, to apostasy under the guise of obedience, appear to be good. On the other hand, we make that which is good be considered disobedience, deliberate irreligion, and a lack of humility. So it is with Monseigneur Lefebvre. Among the Communists and Freemasons, there are some who receive such strength from us that they are unable to sleep, neither day or night they can only work unceasingly to harm the Church. We give them the strength, we have the ability. We have such power that, if they make an alliance with us, we can give them the strength to harm the Church, in a way not spoken of in any book. Absolutely nothing has been said about what we are doing and what is being plotted by the Freemasons and by certain cardinals. He went into it a long time ago, he knows everything, but he can do nothing. As we have said, his hands and feet are tied. He can do nothing, he receives injections. The doctor, listen carefully, who treats the Pope, is manipulated in such a way that the Pope receives certain poisons which are harmful to his head and to his mind. But in spite of that, he knows perfectly well what is good. The Blessed Virgin does not, for example, permit it that he might say one day, "I excommunicate Monseigneur Lefebvre." That she would never allow. His strength is always so paralyzed, so reduced, that he no longer has the power to stand alone against the others. That is his martyrdom. It is a heavy trial and is permitted from on high. He is, as we have said, a martyr pope. He who does not believe this will see, his eyes will be opened. Then what a blow that will be for us! We are working day and night to prevent these things coming to light. Many are already aware, but the majority are not. The truth, will always come out, it always comes out in the end. But when it does, many people will suffer frightfully, they will suffer frightfully as a result of it, just as the Pope, the true Pope, is suffering now. At the same time, I must say again, because things always happen as those up there wish, and as it is they who began the development of this book. I must say, that of the important revelations, and of the revelations of the book in general, there is not one which has not been made and written as heaven wishes now, and wished it in the past, and in accordance with the will of on high. Even with the minor revelations, they do not allow them to be false. Nevertheless, if anyone should not believe them, we would rejoice about that. Fundamentally, the Blessed Virgin is always and in every way in command against us. If only she also had a little less power. She reduces us to nothing, our actions, I mean. She is making me say what she wishes at this time of great and frightful confusion. It is that the good people should at least be in agreement with each other, and that they should have, as far as possible, one single way of speaking and acting. One must not say, "There is no double, I do not believe it," while another says, "There is one." There must be unity. Because of this, she wishes it to be published strongly and insistently. The double does exist. We have already had to tell you that previously. Pick up the manuscripts, there is more about it in them than we wanted to say. Single out the revelations in which we spoke about the double on earlier occasions, and then read Kohlberg's book, Conspiracy in the Vatican. It is correct. Kohlberg tells the truth in his book. He has only a few small things that are not completely correct, but that is not very important. That damned evidence of the voice recording is authentic. We, demons, have been responsible for its being placed in doubt and rejected. The majority of the collaborators were men who work more with us than with the other side. There are also among them, those who say what is not true, in order that they may destroy him, Pope Paul VI, and his words. How we are forced to say that. She wants nothing more said today, except finally that what she has caused to be said, must be paid attention to. 1977 June 18, Beelzebub. John the 23rd and the Council. John the 23rd commenced his pontificate in 1958. This John was not especially intelligent, he was not particularly learned. We would rather not talk on that subject. Alas, she would like us to say something about him and the damned council, but that is precisely what we do not want to do. You will have much plainer sailing everywhere if you do not talk about the council and just simply go on your way. Alas, she wishes too much of it, too much of it. In 1958, John commenced his pontificate. It was an emergency solution, you could say, but still, it was he who arrived. He was pious and had good intentions, although things did not always turn out as he had foreseen. The fact remains that he convoked the council, and he would have done better had he refrained from doing so. From the point of view of up there, we don't want to say this, we have no wish to preach. Good. It was like this, it was not provided for, up there, that in the end, the baby would be thrown out with the bath water. Those up there had not wanted that. But things being what they are now, it would have been better if the council had not been convoked. There were, it is true, some things which could be said were in need of a renewal. But things being what they are now, the baby has been thrown out with the bath water so completely that the water can run out, the devil knows to where, and all that remains in the bathtub is the filth and the dirt of the child who was in the bath. It would have been better. Yes, the church and the council. With the council, a very great mistake was made. I mean that it is not without good reason that Pope John has said, even today, he would be turning in his grave as he knew what its results are. Of course he knows. He already saw on his deathbed that it was not very smart. But it was already much too late. He did not know that this council would have such deplorable, destructive, catastrophic, frightful consequences. He thought he was doing the right thing. He had good will. He believed that he was doing everything for the greatest good of the church. He wished to renew what little needed renewing. Could he know that later, those cardinals, those fraudulent imitations of cardinals, those evil cardinals, would snatch the scepter from his hands and would plunge everything into this terrible state? Could he know that? He acted in good faith, so he reached heaven at all events. He is saved. He was humble and good, but he was not very gifted. At that time, it would have been necessary to install a very gifted pope, knowing how to govern the church and to maintain his authority in such a way that he could not be countermanded. But he learned that too late. But, everything considered, it was in the plans of those up there because the scriptures must be wholly fulfilled. Everything was in their plan, but all the same, it is a lamentable sight for those up there to see the present situation. He suffered bitterly for it on his deathbed, and he sent for some of his intimate friends, or those whom he thought were loyal to him. He told them that he would like to shout to the world, "If only I had not convoked this council." Because he now saw the frightful consequences of it. But was able to do nothing more, and because he was now on his deathbed and could no longer do anything at all to stop everything, may the Lord wish to be merciful to him, that was all he could still say. Let the others, the so-called heaven, to make that known to the world and also to the next pope. But those supposedly trustworthy men thought, he is on his deathbed, he is no longer completely rational. When a council has been convoked, one can't just simply say, "We are stopping it," as if it were a tap which had been turned on full and only had to be turned off again. This council no longer had a handle by which one could take control or slow it down. Things were already too far advanced for anyone to be able to do anything. The control was broken. It was already broken when John the 23rd died. Naturally, we, demons, were involved in the coup. We were trying to gain an advantage everywhere. Naturally, we did our utmost so that this tap could no longer be turned off to stop the flood. That is why you have dissensions which are deadly, catastrophic, frightful, and everything else the devil knows how to create. His trustworthy men said, "Perhaps he has arteriosclerosis, or something like that, and he no longer knows very well what he is saying." The trustworthy men said to each other, "This must definitely not become known. Things are so far advanced, everything is so much underway and so involved, that one can no longer pull the feet out of the shoe." Then came Pope Paul VI, intelligent and gifted. But what could he do to slow down what his predecessor had set in motion, and to put it into reverse? Besides, Paul VI himself made some mistakes in the beginning. He did not know what John the 23rd had said on his deathbed. Then he did learn about it, but too late. At all events, he did not act on it, to his own great harm. He even took some steps that even added to the disaster. His pontificate has now lasted for almost 14 years, and those 14 years have been disappointing for him. He learned very quickly what the council had brought with it of a destructive nature, too late. It is a long time, many years since he understood the faults he committed, but nevertheless, it was too late. Now he follows a terrible road, a martyr's road, as the other demons have previously had to say before me, so that he can no longer do anything in the chaotic situation existing at the present time. People always say, "It is the Holy Spirit, it must be the Holy Spirit." When, for example, the false pope receives diplomats and all sorts of political men in whatever fashion happens to enter into his head, or as it pleases his cardinals. Then the world, or at least the world which calls itself faithful to the pope, says again, the Holy Spirit breathes. This must be the Holy Spirit. But the majority of people do not know that the Holy Spirit no longer has anything to do with it. Now we don't wish to speak any more. In the beginning, the Holy Spirit was still present some of the time, but even at that stage, not always. The witness of the angels. You must all make acts of faith, hope, charity and contrition. You must pray. We do not want to say anything today. We do not wish to say anything, we must not speak. Lucifer does not want us to speak. Lucifer does not want us to say what she wishes. But Lucifer hates her, the great lady up there. He always gets in a great rage when the great lady obtains what she wants and what she has in her crowned head. She is there. Naturally, she is exercising her high authority again. It is because today is the feast of the Immaculate Heart. And how she is there. She is almost crushing me. She nearly crushes me, Beelzebub. If I had just recognized her. At that moment, she did not yet exist, but she was shown to us, as she would come. She was shown to us, as she would come one day as the great CO Redemptrix, the great lady. In our majestic, angelic grandeur, we believed ourselves to be so much above her, and so much higher, that we were not willing to allow one exceptional woman to be higher than us. This was also a powerful motive that contributed to our fall, in which we were hurled down below. Each day we became more gloomy. I must explain that in eternity, one does not count in days, but speaking figuratively and according to your measurements, each day we became more gloomy, less majestic, so much so that Michael, the archangel, who previously was still a little, unimportant angel. Ah! Michael, Michael. At this name, we become frantic that Michael, who was for us a little unimportant angel, can now exercise such domination and almost crush us. Almost everything that we lost has fallen to Michael's lot. Alas, yes. From that time on, it was very necessary that he, up there, gave him an elevated rank, so that he can exercise angelic domination over the world as he up there wishes and commands. I should, but Lucifer does not agree. I must not speak. But then Lucifer is going to abuse me. It is better for me to keep my mouth shut. We definitely do not like to hear what she says and wishes. Besides, she always wants so much, she always wants something. Let her stay up there, the great lady, since we really ought to stay down below. Let her stay where she is. Let her stop coming all the time to wrangle with us and to dictate to us. You are right, but owing to all that, it is in spite of everything, a rotten inferior place for us. She should not come all the time to wrangle with us and dictate to us. It is a cursed thing for us. We would rather not speak about it. What that woman up there wishes is not our province, it is not our business. She shouldn't come to upset our plans. She always has these churchy ideas. I hardly dare to say that aloud. You will end up bringing us back to the point with holy water and blessings. She says, that is the last straw for us, that she now wishes that. She says that you should get down on your knees and say first holy, 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 3 times, then a rosary of tears. But we say, you shouldn't pray. The more you pray, the more we will fight against you, because you provoke us. You will have the most beautiful life if you do not pray, if on the other hand, you do your own will. And yet you will have only persecution, you will have only enormous misfortune. The prayers demanded, holy, 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 3 times, and the rosary of tears are said together. We can easily do without that one, the rosary of tears. Actually, tears of blood would be better than tears, but you should just say tears. The 2 would be better. Can't you take your paws off there? We don't want any of those consecrated paws, and no more roses. The souls in purgatory can also pray. If they can no longer do anything else, they can pray. They also can timidly mumble something for the church. And if you invoke them for this reason, they must do it, and they do it. They know what is now at stake. They know a great deal about it, particularly those who are in the higher stages. Those who are the lowest, where we can still see them, for there are many levels, if you like, they have little ability, they are for the most part cruelly tormented. Those who are the lowest, when they have been very wicked people and have committed many sins, sometimes do not know if they are in hell or if they have been saved. We can still see what is happening to those right at the bottom. They are in what is called the inferior lake. Only by means of an incalculable number of prayers and sacrifices. Many are staying there until the end of the world, and they are content, and all things considered, they bless God in complete submission that He has sent them down there. It is, you could say, the frontier between hell and purgatory. It is still purgatory. But there especially, are found those souls which would have deserved hell, but which, thanks to the sacrifices, the numerous sacrifices of people who offer themselves up, have been saved at the last moment. We do not like talking about it. You should not pray for the souls in purgatory, we don't like that. Those in heaven say Judas has already had to say it on October 31st, 1976, that the souls in purgatory are now terribly disappointed. But let them suffer like that, let them hunger like that. We have to do it. You no longer need to gain the indulgences which the Church has granted when you pray. Let them starve. We have to suffer quite atrociously in hell. Whatever one pope has established, another cannot suppress simply and solely as you would take an old shoe back to the shoe shop, because it is dirty or it no longer pleases you. When you give a present to someone, a very big present, we do not like talking about it. Indulgences are presents of inestimable value, incomparable treasures for the poor souls in purgatory, they are immense treasures. When a big present is given to someone which pleases him enormously, gives him great joy, which keeps him occupied in a lasting way, and from which he gains some profit, then the giver cannot come and say, I made a mistake in giving you that present. You have played with it enough. Now, you must give it back to me. That doesn't work. Then the recipient would reply, no, you must be joking. Do you imagine that I am going to give you back the present which you gave me? He would say, years have gone by, it is more than 10 years since you gave it to me. I am keeping it, and that's that. You can't take me to court for that. You should have thought about this before giving me the present. So it is with indulgences. Those up there make me say that the indulgences that one pope has granted, another cannot purely and simply withdraw. For example, merely because beneath the aspirations, sweet Jesus, grant them eternal rest, or Sacred Heart of Jesus, make me love you more and more, there appeared the words 100 days or 300 days or 7 years or something like that. Merely because of that, there is far from sufficient reason for a pope to suppress these indulgences. But, to cut a long story short, that was not envisaged and ordered in that way by the Pope himself. What they wanted to do was absolute suppression of the whole thing. It was said, men no longer understand these indulgences of 300 days, 7 years, the plenary indulgence. They believe that purgatory is cut short by 300 days, or something like that. That could have been the subject of sermons, to explain that these 300 days are ecclesiastical punishments, ecclesiastical penances according to ancient customs. The number of days corresponded to the time during which great sins had to be expiated, during which great sinners had no right to enter the church, but had to remain at the door. The penances that they used to do, the suffering that they used to endure, are what the indulgences represent. We must still add this: these indulgences of 300 days or of 7 years were, for all that, very little in comparison with what sinners used to have to undergo through ecclesiastical penances. It was a priceless present for the souls in purgatory and also for men. All the indulgences are a priceless present. But what has been bound by one pope previously, another pope cannot loose. if he has not the express intention of doing so. Although he was involved in it, it was not the Pope alone, others were also involved. He was not involved as much as the others, things were negotiated and manipulated so that the souls in purgatory no longer receive the benefits of such prayers. Don't get back onto the Mass of Saint Pius V. How we must always tell the truth and nothing but the truth. It is a rotten story that we would like to get away from. You keep coming hack all the time with truth and with that example. The sacraments, that is precisely what we do not want to talk about. It is a subject we would prefer not to tackle. Things are now the way they are. Whether we should now say more about it or not, things are now the way they are and you cannot do anything more to change them. If only you had all stayed at home. What is it you want? The sacrament of penance, that is something. Those collective absolutions, those penitential ceremonies do not come directly from the Pope. Nor has he said that they take the place of a true confession. That is an invention of ours, the demons. Without a true confession, people lose all moral conscience. As a result, they sin much more. They think, if one is not obliged any more to kneel in a confessional facing a simple old fellow in a soutane, if one is not obliged to tell one's business, life will be much easier. Then it will be much easier to allow oneself a little slip, or to place an amorous kiss or two on the cheek of a married person. One will no longer be obliged to tell that to a crow. They, up there, do not like the use of the word crow. But for us, in that situation, they are filthy rubbish and crows. People think also, now, one will no longer be obliged to kneel down humbly and confess, look here, I did this, and I did it a second time, I have been living with this woman, and with this one who is married. They think quite simply, today, one is allowed to do that. The priests themselves say that one only has to go to penitential ceremonies and everything is forgiven. Why then, should huge penances and great acts of humility be imposed upon us? Now we can sin much more easily. We kneel as we please up there at the front, or down there at the back, and we let them give absolution in the penitential ceremonies for our share of the sins. Then we will be forgiven, since the priest says so. The priest also says that now the penitential ceremony replaces confession. That is what is happening. And then you believe that in the penitential ceremonies people do exactly what they should do to make a true confession. You believe that the 5 or 6 B's still take place, for example bitten bisinnen. We would rather not say that. Buzzin, penance, not only should they carry out their penance, they must also make satisfaction for the punishment due for their sins. They could do that through many, many indulgences. Then the 300 days, or 7 years or whatever else would be applicable to them just as the Pope formerly granted these indulgences. These indulgences are still valid today. But the people do not know that. It should be proclaimed again from the height of all the pulpits. She says that the penitential ceremony never replaces confession. We have already had to say that. Never does it replace a confession, far from it. True, complete, sincere confession must be brought back to its rightful place. This should be proclaimed from the height of all the pulpits. In the name, tell the truth as you must, as the Blessed Virgin wishes. Say what you have to say about confession. Men should prepare much better for confession. It would not be too much to spend a whole hour in preparation. On the subject of confession in particular we, demons, are very knowledgeable. We tempt men in all sorts of ways. We strive to ensure that they do not have true contrition. If we do not succeed, and if repentance takes possession of the man, we then come, preferably with 3 more demons, and we put pressure on him, so that he does not have a desire to improve. With many of them, we also see to it that they do not completely recognize all their sins. For that, we deploy particular demons. When all these stages have been gone through, when the penitent has prayed well to the Holy Spirit, has acknowledged his sins, has examined his conscience and has been sorry for his sin. Sorrow for sin is the main part of confession. Then we set to work on the firm purpose and strive for him not to make a firm purpose and thus receive fewer graces. When a man makes a firm purpose about his predominant fault, he receives special graces. He chooses to tell the priest his predominant fault. This is an act of humility, and where there is humility there can be certain graces, which do not come without it. When the man has not been caught by us and has reached the last stage and has entered the confessional after having made a firm purpose, then we bring in the last demon so that, at the last moment, at the moment of confessing his sins, he may be overcome by a great fear, so much that he would rather not confess them, even if it is only a matter of venial sins. With grave sins, it is assuredly more fatal not to confess them. If, indeed, one knowingly keeps silent about grave sins, one cannot obtain the state of grace. But even with venial sins which are known, but not confessed, fewer graces are received. Then there is less tendency to change or amend one's life. When we have reached this stage with pious people, this happens particularly with pious and very pious people, and when the penitent is kneeling in the confessional and has truly said everything to the priest, according to his soul and to his conscience, even better if he has added God knows what, then the confession is good. In speaking of adding God knows what, I mean that there are people who accuse themselves of faults or of sins when they are not completely sure that these are sins. If in spite of that, they tell them to the priest, which often requires a great deal of humility, they are more at ease afterwards. Through this humility and this openness, they obtain even more supplementary graces. Such a confession is good, it is worthy of the name of confession. Then the penitent receives the great, the deadly, for us demons, absolution, ego te absolvo. Ah, how we hate that! Even today, we hate it. But we no longer have to fear individual absolution so much. Now the penitential ceremony has replaced confession, and now that the sacrament of penance is no longer so prevalent. Ah! Once again, how we were forced to say that. She up there says that it should be proclaimed from the height of all the pulpits that the return of true confession is required. A penitential ceremony is not a confession. A penitential ceremony is a mass demonstration, it is a kind of stage setting which gives the illusion that everything is forgiven and pardoned. We say, go home with an easy mind, receive the Lord's body with an easy mind. You have peace in your souls. You can be tranquil. That represents a terrible loss for those up there. Such a way of seeing things is very harmful for men. Naturally, not for us. The more respect disappears, the more we celebrate. 1977 June 18, Beelzebub. The Lady of All Nations. There is a book, it has already been on the market for a number of years. It is called, The Lady of All Nations. We have claimed that it originated from a privileged soul, who, moreover, had suffered much. We mixed many good things into it, in particular about famine, war, and catastrophes. The Freemasons are not afraid to use the name of the cross in order to harm the rest of the people. The great lady up there has never said that it was now necessary to accept the novelties, that it was necessary to go along with one's times, that heaven wanted things so. The book comes from Amsterdam, read it right through once. The little picture that goes with it is displayed in many churches. On it these words appear, send now your spirit etc. and, at the end, deign, O Lady of all nations, who was formerly Mary, to be our advocate. This last sentence should give food for thought. Who was formerly, she is not that any more. We, together with the Freemasons, turned that phrase. It was a great success for us. They have copied details in certain lives of the saints, thinking it necessary to finish it off with something analogous. But, at the same time, they have always laid stress on the Church that must draw nearer to modernism. We have even succeeded in getting it published with an imprimatur. Ha! Ha! We have really finished it off with that. Besides, nearly always in the book, it speaks of the Lady, not the Mother of God, or any other similar title. And on the picture, was formerly Mary. Ha! Ha! Was formerly, for the church which no longer believes in her. For many, she was that once for those who question her virginity, and do not want there to be a hell. We often mimic what you do for your church. Often, too, we mimic the privileged souls. With our wise heads, we are successful in many things. The Blessed Virgin Mary and the warnings from the beyond. Yes, that is correct. When the great lady wants anything, she always gets there, through all obstacles. She maneuvers as much as is necessary, until she has obtained what she wants. In any case, they up there have their own methods. We do not want to speak, we do not want to speak. We were tremendously joyful when we saw that things were not proceeding well for the book. We had hoped that the book would fall through without having seen the light of day. But this filthy, cheap rag has, in spite of everything, succeeded in breaking through. Ah, but only because they up there wanted it. If you look at things from the human viewpoint, this cheap rag would not have been successful. Alas! To think that this cheap rag had to come out? It is a terrible defeat for us. Ah, this cheap rag will end up driving us crazy. Hell hates the priest's stole. With what satanic pleasure would we pull of all the stoles, take them down to hell, and burn them? Can you imagine how we would dance with joy, if we could throw all the stoles and the headgear of all the priests and bishops into a heap and set fire to them? If only we were able to do that. We demons would set fire to them in every corner at the same time. That would produce a smoke in hell which would rise right up to the earth. If that happened, we would have another of our celebrations. 1977 June 18, Beelzebub. The Eucharistic Fast. Here is the way it is, the sacraments should not have had to be changed at all. This was brought about partly through the machinations of Freemasonry. On the other hand, with Holy Communion for example, the Pope happened to say that it was rather a severe law, which obliged people to remain fasting all night. In the mission areas especially, they could be obliged to remain fasting until midday, or even until the evening, and this was often hard. But it was also an invaluable gain, because people were obliged to do penance, to make very great sacrifices, which had the general effect of saving thousands and thousands of souls. Through these sacrifices and trials, very many souls used to be snatched away from us. That is why heaven would have preferred that the law of the Eucharistic fast was not changed. Somebody said the Pope or the cardinals, it doesn't matter who, that it could no longer stop at that point, and that a step should be taken to meet them. So the law was first reduced to 3 hours, then to 1 hour. The law of the full fast, before, one could not even have milk or anything like that, even liquid was not allowed, it was a penance, but heaven approved of it. Heaven preferred that to the way it is now. The cardinals, and the Pope also to a certain extent, believed that now the crowds would flock to the communion table if the law were lightened for this reason. At first it did have the effect that a few more people were able to go to communion. But now the situation is much more serious than it was before the law of the Eucharistic fast was changed. Now fewer people come to communion, to the communion table at all events, fewer people in the state of grace than used to come before the council changed the law. Now the situation has become deplorable, and it is one more thing which is not at all pleasing to those up there. If this law were still in existence, it would be more those who are deeply pious and in the state of grace who would go to communion, because they would be obliged to be fasting and through that, making more sacrifices. But if they are obliged to fast for only 3 hours, or even 1 hour, that is not a sacrifice any more. Broadly speaking, on the subject of this law of the Eucharistic fast, many people say to themselves, if the Pope has been able to change the law and reduce the fast from all day to 3 hours, then to 1 hour, one can very well take something, say a quarter of an hour before going to communion. It is no longer important. Now everything is easier, whatever one does, it is no longer important. The same applies to abortion, and it is the same for everything now. Formerly the Pope would have done better to think of this. It was very much better, when the law of the Eucharistic fast was in existence. For when there is no more sacrifice, no more self-denial, there are far fewer heavenly blessings and far fewer graces. And men think about things much less when it is just like going through a turnstile. Formerly, it was always necessary to think, I must not eat. Who is coming into my heart today? The Most High, the Holy of Holies, whose grandeur and majesty no human being would ever know how to attain. That is the way people used to always think, and they used to pray about it beforehand, even during the night. Many still do, but not as many as before. Taking everything into account, there were, in Holy Communion, before this relaxation, many more divine blessings. The same goes for confession. Communion in the hand in the primitive church. Christ, we saw this ourselves at the time when he broke the bread, did not give it into the hands of the apostles. We do not wish to speak any more. Not anymore. We do not like saying that. But we particularly do not like saying it at this time. At the time when Christ said, "This is my body," at the Last Supper, he put the bread directly into the mouths of the apostles. There is no question about the precious blood, they drank it, and did not have it in their hands first. The apostles who were present at the Last Supper never acted otherwise, they gave Holy Communion in the mouth. Christ did not wish that later it would be received in the hand. If later, they did receive it in the hand, it was because they had a wrong understanding of things. Christ never wished it. He himself gave it into the mouth, and even the Blessed Virgin never received the sacrament any other way, and always kneeling, bowing very deeply. We do not like saying this. We were full of fury against her whenever she received communion. She saw and, in a mystical way, experienced everything that happened at the Last Supper. She nearly always knew everything. She was destined to guide the church. The apostles were also destined for this, but she had in a very large measure, to work with them. We have had to say this before, she was on her knees day and night, praying for the apostles, so that everything would go well in Christ's church. The apostles, who were at the Last Supper, never gave communion any way but into the mouth. If that happened differently later on, it was not the fault of the apostles. No more did Jesus and his mother have any part in it. They neither planned for nor wished for that. It was absolutely not their intention. You must not ask that question. It is we who schemed and plotted for that. We said to ourselves, if we can manage to introduce communion in the hand among the early Christians, then later on they will be able to say, there was communion in the hand previously at the time of the first Christians. And so it was that this council, these men of today, would be able to say, the first Christians communicated in the hand, therefore there is nothing wrong in it. They were the first Christians, it was the time of the life of Christ, they were near Christ. Therefore, it absolutely cannot be sinful. True, they did not know that this was not wanted by God. At that very moment, even then, we said to ourselves that if we could make that happen, the result would be a certain lukewarmness. However, communion in the mouth was brought back. Certain saintly souls and very great doctors of the Church saw clearly where this was leading, and that it would be better and that there would be much more respect if he up there were received in the mouth, if they could not simply take him into their hands, into their filthy hands, with nails too long or varnished, or uncared for hands. We cannot even say it all. There are often people who have not washed their hands all day, when they go somewhere. I do not want to say that. It is a frightful irreverence. There are many who do not believe in God so much. They see symbolism everywhere, a little like the Protestants. At the beginning, the council was not like that, but later it was decided that it had to take steps towards the Protestants and the others. This was solidarity, this was good, this was Christian charity, and so, partly with the help of the Freemasons, we were able to reach the point where it was being said, it is necessary to be charitable, conciliatory, to practice love of neighbor, to have dialogue one with the other, until finally, the stage is reached where everything can be softened and changed a little, and things rearranged in such a way that they lose their value and their profound meaning. So it can happen that important graces are lost because one goes along with the crowd. 1977 June 29, Beelzebub. The Sacrament of Orders. What we must still say about his sacrament will have to be included in the book. For that to happen, you will need to say a complete rosary of tears, and 3 times, Holy Michael, Archangel, and 1 Hail Mary in honor of Saints Peter and Paul and each of the 12 apostles. Only after that, will we be obliged to speak about this sacrament, and so that it may be the truth, she says you will be required to pray, to say all the prayers she asks for. The new rite for conferring this sacrament. The great lady does not very much like the priestly ordination as it is now practiced. They, in heaven, do not like this new rite. This new ordination is done more with the people in mind than with God and His Majesty in mind. The rite of the past must he used, and the accent put on the fact that the priest is a priest of the Most High according to the Spirit of Jesus Christ, the eternal and unique High Priest. Instead of that, it is more from the people's point of view now, both in the consecration and the rite. Arising from that, there are far fewer graces. That is why these priests, later on, will have much less understanding of good and of evil. If the priestly ordination were administered as it used to be, there would be a much greater understanding of the Holy Spirit, the understanding of what is right and what is not. That commences at the very moment of ordination. It is the same kind of thing that happens at confirmation. The priestly ordination is no longer administered exactly as it should be, so much so that there is no longer the plenitude of graces, it is no longer the complete ordination. It is the priest's mission to teach, to celebrate the Holy Mass in a proper way, to administer the sacraments in a proper way, to bless and to consecrate. The character or ineffaceable mark of the sacrament of orders. The priestly ordination is a very great, very exalted, universal sacrament, before which the rest of us down below, demons, must capitulate. This sacrament also imprints on the soul an ineffaceable mark. When the priest has fulfilled his duties badly, has lived a bad life, and comes to join us in hell, we are able to torment him much more. This applies to 3 sacraments, Holy Baptism, Holy Confirmation, and the Holy Consecration of a priest. These 3 sacraments imprint an indelible mark on the soul, which will never be able to be removed, not even in hell. That is why these men, these Catholics such as Judah, suffer much greater torments in hell than those who have never received these sacraments. These are incomparably great sacraments, which bring to those who receive them much more elevated graces than men can appreciate. When he does not correspond to these graces, this priest or this bishop is then tormented much more, in a much more persistent way, than if he had never received them. That is why he who wishes to become a priest must examine his conscience, must make himself examine it carefully and seriously, to see if he is called to it. There are many of them who believe that they are called to the priesthood, but in fact their call would be to another state, as lay people. Icon will triumph in spite of everything. Ah! That cursed icon, it will conquer. We are scheming madly and doing everything that we can against it. But it has the only true priesthood. We have to acknowledge that. It will conquer in spite of all the opposition and all the attacks. It will conquer. There would be no need to attack it, if it were not true and authentic. Whatever they do at Icon should make no difference to the others who are always talking about solidarity and dialogue. Why don't they leave him alone, Monseigneur Lefebvre? Why do they torment him like that? It comes about only because we want it, because we do not want the truth and because we fear that the Church may come to life again. We do not want the Church to prevail and to come to life again in order to become once more what it ought to be, and what they up there want it to be. We do not want that. That is why we have, in addition to our fury against Pope Paul VI, a mad fury against Archbishop Lefebvre. The second of our hatreds is directed against him. But, in the end, those two will conquer. The duties of the priest. The priests must teach. Do they still do it properly? Do they still preach properly? Do they still instruct the children properly? Most of the time they don't anymore. They distort many things and no longer teach the truth in the way they should teach it. They no longer instruct the children, they no longer preach on the virtues and vices, nor on the art of practicing the virtues. What the majority teach and preach today, are anecdotes. They derive many of their arguments from their many synods, because they mutually support each other in their modernism and would like to impose it on the people. The people don't want the truth anymore, they want to take the line of least resistance. So they have a very easy time of it. Today, they don't like hearing talk about the virtues nor about the imitation of Christ. Suffering, much suffering, carrying the cross, the man of today does not like to hear talk about those things. He would prefer not to follow the cross of Christ as those up there would want him to. He would prefer to please himself how he lives. Not all the priests still say the Holy Mass every day. Many now say it only once or twice a week, and the people are barely aware of it, as hardly any go to Mass anymore. Just look in the churches. The more they are becoming entrenched in modernism, the fewer people they have in the church. It is in this way that Christian life is disappearing. Loss of graces due to lack of respect at Mass. There are now some priests who do not even believe anymore that it is necessary to genuflect at the consecration. But when, for example, the bishop comes to administer confirmation, or for some other occasion, then, all of a sudden, they bend their knees, because they believe it would create a bad impression in front of the bishop, if they were to remain standing upright like a military man. This would have a much worse effect, if the bishop himself were making more than just a simple genuflection. So, we, demons, whisper in their ear, make some gesture of reverence, kneel down, otherwise you are going to be hauled over the coals by the bishop. That is what we whisper in their ears, so successfully that the bishop does not become at all aware that they are not doing things correctly in their everyday life. But when only the people are there, and there is no bishop nor other superior, then they do not consider themselves small enough in the sight of him up there, to have to bow down before him. They have more of the feeling that before him they can just as well remain standing, that it is of no importance. In the same way, it no longer matters anymore when the people remain seated in the church and pay hardly any attention to the consecration and remain standing like sentries during the blessing. It is of no importance, it is only him up there. We must also say, we have had to say it before, this aggiornamento represents a terrible, deadly loss for the people and for the priests. Many people are aware of this, but for a good number it is fine this way, because it is easier, when one can remain seated during almost the entire Mass, and when things are made easier on all sides. If the people were still obliged to kneel at Massachusetts, as formerly, in many places they do kneel, but if everywhere, throughout the whole world, they were still obliged to kneel and to show him up there the respect which is his due, there would be so many more graces and enlightenment. If they were to get back on their knees and pray very devoutly, they would become aware that the life they are leading is much too easy and too even, for the bishops. The Good Shepherd. The true priesthood preserves celibacy, the great lady makes me say. The true priesthood keeps its distance when confronted with easy living and the line of least resistance. The true priesthood expends all its energy, entirely and totally, for the people, whom it identifies with Christ, with the mystical body of Christ. The true priest would sooner let himself be killed than fail to accomplish what Christ wishes, in the way he wishes it, and in the way those up there wish it. Nowadays, the priests would have plenty of time to make visits to homes. Formerly, they did not even have any means of transport, and they used to devote hours to pastoral visits. They used to make visits several hours' distance away, if they suspected that they could convert a soul. No sacrifice seemed too great to them. Today, look in the towns, are the people still visited? Very few still do so, and not through love for the well-being of souls. Many people complain that they are not visited. The more the priests have the means of transport, and the easier it is, the less are they going out to meet the people. This comes about because they possess fewer graces and because they pray less, because they no longer say the breviary, because they are not ordained in the proper way, because they are no longer living the true priesthood of Christ, the true imitation of Christ, which preaches, in the name of God, the cross, suffering and sacrifice. A true shepherd is ready to shed his blood for each of his sheep. He goes looking for the least of his sheep if they are lost or tangled up in the brambles through sacrifice and self-denial. Christ has said in the parable of the Good Shepherd, that he searches for his lost sheep until he finds it, that he takes it up on his shoulders and then heaven rejoices. He did not say that idly. He was saying it principally for the priests and the bishops, for the clergy. This is an unchangeable teaching, which must be taken very seriously, and if it is not done, then it is no longer the imitation of Christ. Those up there take no pleasure in priests who are unwilling to go looking for their sheep and who do only what happens to come into their heads. The holy cure of Ars. It is necessary to make sacrifices, as a parish priest, Vianney of Ars, used to make them. He used to pray for entire nights when he knew that there were some sheep in his fold who were not living at all according to the will of God. He used to give everything and sacrifice everything. He did not even sleep in a proper bed. Often, he used to pray for hours in front of the tabernacle, sometimes in order to save only one single soul. He came under furious attacks from the rest of us down there, often because of just one soul, and that when he was not at all clever, and was very weak in theology and Latin. The priests of today say to themselves, "We are clever, we are doctors, we know everything better." But in the final analysis, those are not the things which they are concerned about up there. They are not concerned whether someone is clever, or about what he has in his brain, or about what he knows about philosophy and mathematics. Before all else, they consider this: is he a true shepherd? Does he go to look for his sheep? Is he ready to give his life and everything that he has for his sheep? That is what those up there are looking at, and the great evil today is that the priests of this time do not do those things anymore. There should be preaching again about the cure of Ars, and about Catherine Emmerich, who, on her bed of pain, did nothing but suffer and pray for the church. Many other saints have done that too. Padre Pio has suffered much for the church and for sinners. It should be proclaimed from the height of the pulpits that it would be better to devote one's time to imitating Christ, rather than to gaining doctorates. There must be some of those, it is true. But for the majority, it would be better if they did not study philosophy or mathematics or theology, etc. For many, it would be better to spend half their nights in prayer and invoking the Holy Spirit, to live the true imitation of Christ and the Marian doctrine of Saint Grignion de Montfort, for example, putting their trust completely in the Blessed Virgin, in her most pure heart and in the Sacred Heart of Jesus, to look towards the cross and do exactly what those up there wish. That would be better than toiling and studying for hours, simply to make an impression before the world. How I have been forced to say that. How I have been forced to say that. Lenin, for example, the father of the Russian Revolution, has said that it was necessary to give up whole nights and all his time for the revolution. But many priests do not even do what the unbelievers do. Lenin knew what had to be done to make the revolution succeed. He gave up everything for that. But, she, the great lady, makes me say, the priests of today are no longer prepared to sacrifice themselves entirely, and to sacrifice everything that they have for the people. It is true that they must reckon with this: the more someone sacrifices himself, the more we fight against him. That was the way it was for the priest Vianney. We started a fire in his room. But that is of no consequence, those up there make me say. In spite of everything, those up there and the great lady will be victorious, and the priests who still practice the true priesthood will carry off an incomparable victory. No doctorate, nor any other title, can he compared with the good done by priests who still have the true understanding of souls, and the true understanding of men, and who know how to put themselves in the place of each man. They ask themselves, What else could I do to save these people? What is the best way to preach? What must I do to bring them back to the practice of the sacraments? Naturally, it is necessary at the same time for them to administer the sacraments in the proper way and according to the ancient rite, so that the heavenly blessing may be attached to them. Unless they do this, they have to some degree lost ground. Heaven must be earned painfully. Christ exercised the true priesthood in the most perfect, the most pure and the most incomparable way, and his apostles did too. They did not wonder whether they would be imprisoned or martyred. They had no fear. Our priests, on the other hand, are afraid of losing their position if they do not do exactly what many bishops say, although this is not the truth, and this is not obedience any more according to the way those up there see it. For we have already had to say that, now, one can no longer obey in cases where the command is not what it should be. Ah! This is crazy, that we have been obliged to speak in this way. God must be obeyed in preference to men. Did the apostles have regard for men, Romans, or anyone else? They had courage. They went to prison and gave themselves up to martyrdom for Christ. Where, therefore, among today's Christians, is the sacrament of confirmation, the mark of the soldier of Christ, which they have on their brow? Catholics still bear this mark, and the priests have, in addition, that of their priestly consecration, and they would have the angels to assist them. Why, for the love of heaven, don't priests pray to the holy angels? Why don't they call on their patron saints? And Saints Peter and Paul? And all the apostles and doctors of the Church? What things they could teach them, or how they could inspire them, if only they were invoked. And, before all else, the Holy Spirit. The apostles had no fear of anything, and nothing was too high a price for them. They used to administer the sacraments properly, and they had a great respect for them. That is where you should be looking towards the first apostles, not towards those who came later, towards isolated groups who did not live and did not act at all after the example of the apostles. You must not look towards the mediocre, the negative, but upwards, towards the best and what was done by the best. If you do this, you cannot say, these ones here and those ones there did things well, and no more can you imagine that now the same thing is good. This is a monumental error. Ah! How we hated this priest of ours! We were in a terrible rage against him. He was so stupid, he did not even know Latin properly. How was he able to snatch such a great crowd of people away from us people who, without him, would have come to hell? Ah! She makes me say, if only there were more priests like this cure, parish priest, Vianney. It is not money, nor possessions, nor intelligence that count. What does count, is what the priests do, what the state of their soul is, and the way in which they carry out the will of God. That is what counts, even if they should be the least among men in the eyes of the world, and seem to be of no consequence and to occupy only the lowliest of positions. Those priests are much greater in the eyes of those up there, than he who wears a bishop's mitre, or a cardinal's hat, or anything else you like. Ah! How we have been forced to say that! The great responsibility of the pastoral burden. On this subject, we must say this again: it would be better for many bishops and cardinals if they had remained as the lowliest of laymen, and had never occupied such high positions, rather than manage their responsibility badly, and fulfill it in a mediocre way. They have a terrible responsibility. In the event of their coming to hell, we are able to torment them much more. For many of their number, it would be better if they stayed as laymen, for a high position is also a weighty responsibility. For many, it would be better, unless they pray for entire nights and fast like the cure of ours, or unless they always do only what those up there wish. If they had prayed to the Holy Spirit to obtain wisdom and enlightenment, about what they should do, before foolishly banning places of pilgrimage, or before acting simply in accordance with the advice of their episcopal vicars or goodness knows who else. They must, even though it could make them unpopular, impose their own point of view and ideas, in opposition to all the ideas and points of view of their subordinates which do not come from the Holy Spirit. It would be much better to send those subordinates away, saying, I am sorry, but I must act according to my soul and my conscience, and to show courage, like the holy apostles, Peter and Paul, who had an incomparable courage. And Christ, what courage he had! He was persecuted. He suffered the attacks and the harassments of the Pharisees right up until his death on the cross. Did he give way because of all that? Did he say, if they attack me this way, I am giving up my mission? It is senseless to allow myself to be crucified, men will not listen any more after that. He was able to foresee how many men would not follow him. That should have been enough to discourage him completely. Certainly, he was God, but in the Garden of Olives, he was only a man. His divinity was, in a kind of way, withdrawn from him. He had to endure his humanity in all its weakness and all its loneliness. Nevertheless, he remained steadfast to the end, and it is in this way that his apostles imitated him. Did they say, if we are attacked in this way we had not expected that we will not be able to stand fast any longer? They did not say that. They remained steadfast to the end. Christ gave to the last drop of his blood on the cross in order that he might be imitated. And this imitation is indispensable, particularly for the priesthood. Bishops, cardinals, priests, the great lady makes me say, where are you going? Where is your modernism leading you? The example of the priest leads men astray. Among the first Christians, under the Emperor Nero, many let themselves be tortured to the extent of shedding their blood. They followed Christ to the point that they did not fear death. But the men of today look at the example of the priests, who are no longer what they should be and who also take the line of least resistance. If the faithful were to see priests prepared for all sacrifices and for whom nothing is too much, no sacrifice too great or too difficult, no prayer too much, in their desire to do everything for their sheep, they would be the object of a great veneration and a great respect. The evil lies first and foremost within the clergy. If they, the faithful, could once again depend on them, the clergy, if they were to hear proper sermons again, if the sacraments were once again administered with all the respect which is their due, if they, the priests, had such a respect, they would receive such graces that the lay people would more easily find the road towards Christ, and would see that it is necessary to follow the way of the cross and to make every effort so as not to go off along the slippery road, and the wide path which leads to the abyss. Many thousands of souls would then come back onto the narrow pathway that leads to heaven. We have already had to say previously, in connection with celibacy, how heaven must be earned through sacrifices and self-denials, and that it can be earned. Heaven cannot be earned through automobiles, television, creature comforts, dissoluteness and high living. It requires self-denial, fasting, the cross, the imitation of Christ. We do not want to speak any more. How we have been forced to say those things. Jean-Marie Vianney, for example, paid absolutely no attention to eating. That is why he used to receive graces for his sheep, because he used to fast rigorously and to pray. He scarcely noticed that his potatoes were bitter. He used to eat what he had, he did not even notice when he was hungry. Naturally, it would not be reasonable for a priest to stop eating altogether. It is absolutely necessary for him to eat, but he must not go from one extreme to the other, and get into slovenly ways through dissolute living and gluttony. While on this subject, we must now say, you priests, you bishops, you cardinals, preach again about virtue. Follow the way of the cross. Take refuge in the heart of the Immaculate. Invoke the holy angels. In particular, invoke the Holy Spirit with his strength. Preach the gospel in its most authentic spirit, the preaching of virtue and of the cross. The day of the just anger of God. For the love of heaven. Come back, you priests, follow the way of the cross, recognize at last that you are no longer leading your flocks in the proper way. The great lady makes me say, bishops, cardinals, laymen, priests realize at last that the hour has struck. It is 5 or 10 minutes past midday, it is past midday, she makes me cry out. She makes me say, follow at last the way of virtue and of the cross, and see once again where you must go, where your place is, for you no longer know it. Do penance, pray if possible day and night and be converted, do penance and be converted, for, the day is going to come, the day of the just anger of God, of him up there, who will crush you if you are unwilling to see how you should lead your flock. You laymen, pray also and do penance for your priests, who no longer see what road they are following. Set about this with all your powers and all your strength, otherwise there will be many more thousands of souls who will be lost. Bishops, priests, and lay people, follow the way of the cross. Behold, it is a long time since it struck midnight. This is one of the last warnings, warnings from the beyond, which will still be given in order that men may be converted and see clearly. If you knew what road you are on, if you knew what hour has struck and what it is like down there in hell, you would crucify yourselves. You would make martyrs of yourselves and you would do penance so as not to be damned, so as to be able to shorten that terrible purgatory by only a few years. That is what she, the great lady, makes me say, and that is what those up there make me say, over and over again. For this book, the second part of it, this is now the last statement: do penance, pray, and change yourselves, for, the anger of God will crush you if you do not come back. The great lady is weeping bitter tears, because she sees how many of her children, how many priests, bishops, and cardinals are blind and do not see clearly. She says, and makes me say, for the love of heaven, hear at last the warning, the final warning from the beyond, and do what she wishes. Beg God for grace. Come back, before it is too late and the anger of God comes crashing down on you, and she comes, and before she is obliged to let fall the arm of her Son. We have spoken, this is the end, we have said the final words, for the second part of this book. How we have been forced to say these things, by order of the great lady. 1977 July 13th, Beelzebub. Indulgences. He can say that the indulgences are no longer valid, but they continue to be valid. There is not the full power to loose, if he has not absolutely wished it, she makes me say. That is the entire truth. Misunderstandings. Yes, that is what you would like. We know that, but it will bring you misunderstandings. We are telling you. You must offer it up for the Church, in union with the cross of Christ, through and with the blood of Christ which has been shed for you, and through the Immaculate Heart of Mary. You must offer it for the Holy Church. Nothing should be too great a cost for you. It is something above all thanks, she makes me say. But what is not beyond all thanks? Was it perhaps the death of Christ on the cross? Was that within the range of your gratitude? When he was insulted and covered in filth by his own people, who previously were crying out to him, Hosanna. Was this within the extent of your gratitude? You are worth much less than Christ. That woman up there makes me say that as he suffered death on the cross, as he had to undergo all that, so you must also walk in his steps, and you must take these misunderstandings upon yourselves, until the situation arising out of this has reached the point where those up there wish, where the great lady expressly wishes. That is what she makes me say. Be as hard as granite. Once again, she makes me say, be as hard as granite, as firm as iron, as inflexible as marble. Pursue good, step by step. Look neither to the right nor to the left, neither towards the east nor towards the west, neither ahead nor behind. Look simply and solely upward, towards what she wishes and what is the truth. And that means towards her. That is what the great lady makes me say. Happy are those who believe without having seen. She makes me say, you who are taking part in it, the book, and who have anything to do with it, must not become like soldiers who desert the flag, who suddenly say, we cannot believe that, because it is not yet completely verified. He said, happy those who believe without having seen. Besides, it is also written, I give thee thanks, Father, that thou hast hidden all this from the wise and the prudent, and revealed it to little children. This is what she makes me say, it is necessary to have the faith of a child. One cannot believe this today and that tomorrow, as many priests do today, and so do many lay people. Whenever anyone says, listen here, that cannot be, I have just heard this and that, and according to such and such a privileged soul, that is good too, such a good, well-informed priest has said this or said that, then one cannot simply sway from side to side like a flag in the wind. Then one must be as steady as an oak. She says that you are ungrateful with regard to everything she has caused to be said to you through us, everything that we have been forced to say. Now it was a terrible thing for us to have to do this. She gave us orders to say these things with very great precision, in such a way that does not come naturally, so that the printing of the book may proceed. But men want to soil everything, to blunt, to degrade, to put in doubt and to trample on everything. That is not the way of thinking of that woman up there, not her way of thinking. She is not happy with that. It is necessary to be a good soldier of Christ, and to show courage. And even if at this time, the affair of the double is still outstanding and has not yet been verified in every finest detail, she makes me say, how many times will it be necessary for me to say again that this is the truth and that it comes from her up there? How much more time will it be necessary to wait until the last mind agrees and all people are behaving as they ought to behave? They must accept it in the name of God, and do what she wishes. This is a last chance, one of the last chances. We have said everything that she wanted to say. And she makes me say, for the love of heaven, what is humanity still waiting for? Will it be necessary for the end of the world to come for them to believe? That is what she makes me say. We have said, we, the demons, what she wished to say. Have the demons lied to us? If I had to say it then, I shouldn't have to say anything at all now? She, the Blessed Virgin, makes me say, and the Trinity. They make me say, it is sad, very sad, that they have had to have so many things said by the demons, because the privileged souls are not believed. She has been obliged to have so many things said through the possessed woman, who, because of that, has received very many graces, and men do not believe them. They criticize constantly and consider that they know better. Everyone thinks he knows even better than those up there. She says, those up there do not know better as men do. That is what she says, and what the Trinity say. She makes me say one last time that we have to repeat it to you again, what we have had to tell you is the entire and unchallengeable truth. It is the truth, and nothing but the truth. How we have been forced to say that? 3 times, holy, 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 there is absolutely no error. It may be that things have sometimes been said in a slightly incomplete manner, but for all that it is not possible to communicate like veritable dictionaries. But what there is in the book ought to be enough. Those up there, the Great Lady, the Blessed Virgin, and the Trinity, make me say, that it is black ingratitude on the part of men to criticize their benevolence and not to believe. Men do not want to recognize the solicitude of the Great Lady. Everyone thinks he can criticize and that he knows better, whereas everyone ought, at the very least, to recite a few psalms in honor of the Holy Spirit, before challenging half or any at all of the revelations. And after having said these prayers, each one should examine his conscience again, and yet again. Finally, everyone should then receive Holy Communion worthily, then ask himself in his heart of hearts, am I not possibly going in opposition to the Great Lady and Heaven when I reject or criticize these revelations? That is what she makes me say. In comparison with those who are in heaven and who are saints, you are all, such as you are, filthy little locusts. And these filthy little locusts aspire to demolish, sentence by sentence, everything which she has instructed. Do you believe we wanted to say that? Do all of you believe we wanted to say that? We would so much have preferred to say that half of it was lies, or that a quarter was lies. But unfortunately, we cannot. The business is too serious. Furthermore, she is too much at the back of everything. She was at the back of everything, and she is at the back of everything. To cut a long story short, if that is not enough for you, you have only to take the whole thing, part and parcel, and throw it out the window. 1977 September 15, Judas Iscariot. It is a trick of fate that many bishops, priests, and also lay people often have incomplete views and do not see everything altogether, complete and without any falsification. They do not see the whole picture. Thus, for example, Monsignor Lefebvre believes in the Tridental Mass, and he proclaims it. He proclaims the kingdom of God completely and without falsification. He acts and speaks truly as those up there wish. But he does not believe that there is a double. Among the others, on the other hand, among the very ones who believe in the double, there are some who do not believe that the Tridental Mass is also legitimate. I don't want to speak any more. The true Pope, the true Paul VI, has never hugged and embraced people, he has always been very reserved. The true Pope has been very reserved in his gestures and in his behavior, and he never welcomed anyone at all in that way. It is the false Pope who embraces and hugs, under the guise of Christian charity. The true Pope would not do it. Ask the guards who have been in his service. Try to question different guards who have known him well and who know whether the true Pope has acted like that in the past, or whether he still acts that way now. This is difficult to find out because he is no longer seen very much down there. But these are two important factors which could be studied and which should be discussed. 1977 December 8, Beelzebub. They say, adore more, have more veneration before the Most High, infinite, sublime, universal majesty of God. It is much greater than you believe. Never turn your back on the Blessed Sacrament and exhort others also to adore the majesty of God by bringing it to their notice without delay. Think how the greatest courage and even the greatest goodwill must appear compared with such majesty, or think how everyone should prostrate themselves in the dust before such majesty. And how much more should they grovel in the dust, and how repugnant to the divine majesty are those who are cowardly, like present-day superiors, bishops, and priests who, in the name of God, have no courage at all and who turn more towards exterior things than towards that which is their duty, that which they are commanded to do by those up there, that which the impetus of grace inspires in them. Often they do not respond to the impulses of grace, because this is so difficult in our era, and take the road of so-called obedience, which is no longer obedience in the minds of those up there, as we have previously been compelled to say. There will come a time when everyone, good and bad, modest and proud, sick or well, will see everything clearly. But many will not see clearly until too late, or after they will already have allowed many graces to pass them by, and when they will already have led many into error through this. That is what is tragic. Those up there make me say, because it is no longer possible to bring back a man who is lost and goes to hell, nothing can be done to save his soul, if it is already lost. There are many souls who have died within these last 10 years who would have been saved, if they had been led well by the priests, the bishops, and the superiors. It is horribly tragic, and it can no longer be corrected. We are compelled to say that. She is fated today, on this her feast day as mother, as the Immaculate Conception, there she is, celebrating her feast. Christ was totally without sin and without fault, and she too was without the least sin or fault. She is, and she was, without the smallest blemish. But men carry on the way they are going, with their blemishes and their faults, believing that this is an improvement, and that there is nothing wrong with trumpeting their ideas to the world and converting others to their way of thinking. They often wish to teach others the ideas they have in their hearts. But this is not good, because these doctrines they have in their hearts are false. They should. One cannot simply throw overboard a church, a mass, and sermons that have existed for dozens and hundreds of years. The clergy are blind. The clergy will see too late. Many of them will be lost because they have not wanted to see things clearly. We are being compelled to say all that on this her feast day of the Immaculate Conception, she who was conceived totally immaculate. She has always obeyed him and has never done anything else. In the greatest as in the smallest matters she has done nothing except carry out his will. Yes, she has done even more than strictly what Christ required of her. Oh, what has she not accomplished in her great virtue? She has accomplished even more than was expected of her up there. But you men, and especially the clergy, do not even accomplish what you should accomplish. True, the clergy are not without original sin, that is reserved for her, the most pure. But these priests, bishops, superiors, and lay people still receive many enlightenments which they could respond to, if they wanted to. If they were to pray more to the Holy Spirit, they would be able to accomplish much better what those up there wish, according to what is right and as it will be understood in the end, for they, these priests and lay people, are mistaken. The current manner in which the clergy are directing and leading the church is not in line with the views of those up there. They are our views, originating from us down below. We are being compelled to say this. Imagine being obliged to say this. We are obliged to on this day of her Immaculate Conception, she up there, whose purity and sublimity no human can appreciate even in an approximate way. Even we who are down below, who are proud and who were among the angels, must bow down before so much sublimity, purity, and virtue, must lower ourselves into the dust. How much more should you men sink down into the dust and ashes, but you do not do it? Most men still think that they are almost saints when they set themselves apart from others who are still truly humble and wish to make reparation. Many think that what is actually vice is virtue. When she will come, and that time is approaching. It will be too late. Then, for many, it will be too late. They do not realize, many no longer believe in the great warning or in the great catastrophe. In the same way, many do not believe well, even less still in what this book is proclaiming warnings and what has had to be proclaimed. If we could come back, we would behave better. How much better we would behave if we were still able to. If only we could come back. If we could have again those last 10 seconds which we had up there before being hurled into the abyss, if we had only those last 10 seconds just once more so as to be able to adore His Majesty again and to say, we are sorry, we wanted, in our senseless pride, to be greater than your infinite majesty. We are sorry, do not damn us. Take us up there, let us stay there in the most remote corner. But it is too late for us, it is too late for us. We can do nothing any more. This despair, this endless torment, this darkness which surrounds us for all eternity. Men, open your eyes. Clergy, priests, superiors, bishops, open your eyes. Come back. We can no longer do it, but you still can. You still have these last hours and seconds. Many of you still have years. What good will they be if you do not use them properly? What use will they be to you? What will be the good, if you do what should not be done, and do not do what you ought to do? Do you know what we would do if we were still able to? But we cannot anymore, not anymore. The darkness is appalling, the gnawing worms are appalling, the fire which surrounds us and from which we cannot escape, is appalling. But appalling, too, in the sight of God, are these priests, superiors, and bishops, who, in their pride, wish to exalt themselves above goodness, above messages, warnings, and exhortations from those up there, and who are unwilling to do what those up there wish and have ordained. Many laymen are suffering because of this, the clergy are taking them with them, because the lay people believe the clergy, want to have faith in them, and so they should under normal circumstances. But with such men, they cannot, and must not, have faith in them any longer. Judas has said previously on July 17, 1975, now, one can no longer obey. And we are being compelled to repeat that on this day, the feast of her Immaculate Conception. Follow the way of the cross, listen to the exhortations, the good exhortations. Without doubt, there are certain people who receive graces and yet are not good, but that quickly becomes obvious. Look neither to the right nor to the left, neither to the front nor to the rear, neither towards the east nor the west, but only upward, even if this will from on high is now difficult to carry out. Do not carry out any other will but that from on high, for we have seen what it costs to disobey His infinite majesty. We disobeyed and must now pay the penalty eternally. We will never be able to come back, and many of these priests will never be able to come back, and that is their loss. We have finished speaking for today, the day of the Immaculate Conception. End transmission. Alpha, Mike, Echo, November.